Hi, I'm Johnny. This is Comics Altruism, and this is my entry into Jerno's Comics and Culture 1500 subscriber contest. And he's already well past that. I'm going to leave the link to his contest announcement video below just because there's a lot to take in. He's got a bunch of questions for us to answer. So the first one is, how do we store our comics? And I actually devised a recent way to save a lot of space lengthwise in the comic collections, but I'm going to make a separate video about that just because I want to hear people's input on it. So how I personally store comics is basically pure chaos, but luckily the way that my memory works, I'm able to remember where things are, like what's in process of cataloging, what I still need to rebag and board and all that stuff. So that's how I store comics. All right, so the next one is the favorite cinematic or television show, I'm guessing, portrayal of a comic book character. So mine, Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, fantastic. And I mean, I've got a long list, but I have to put Joaquin Phoenix at the top of that just because it's a more recent film and it still has an impact. And it's an important film, all things considered. So if you haven't seen Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, watch it just for that performance, much less the writing, the cinematography, all that stuff. Everything about that movie is just great. The third one is, what were the first comics that I got into and at what age? I've already mentioned the death of Superman, the 1980s Batman run that my dad would sometimes leave one out for me if it happened to be a weekend or whatever. Very cool thing he did. But one thing I haven't mentioned was the flea market runs that I used to do with my newspaper money. So we're talking 10, 11 years old. And the flea market in my hometown of Woodstock, Ontario was phenomenal for comic books. So I'd just buy like stacks and stacks. And I remember coming across Grayman's video, recent video reminded me of this, was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. I wish I had brought some out to the car so that I could show you, but from the 70s, those ones, the 40 centers, 35 centers, I bought a ton of those, and that would just be like my escape until 2 weeks later when I'd be able to hit up that flea market again. So that was a big one for me. Next two questions, favorite hero, favorite villain. He said pretty much across all pop culture. I have to pick Batman for my favorite hero just because of my history with Batman. The fact that he was the first superhero I was into, mostly because of 1989 Tim Burton Batman, but also because of the 66 show. I'm not that old. I saw them in syndication, but yeah, I was a huge fan. So I got to go with Batman. And if I say Batman, I have to say Joker once again as my favorite villain. If I had chosen a different hero, I'd probably choose a different villain. I did a whole video about Joker recently for Sam's Tangled Web was having a contest. So if you want to know all the reasons why I'm into Joker, you can go check out that video. The next one is, what is your favorite universe? So Marvel, DC, Star Wars, etc., etc. I'm wondering if I can say, Jerno, that Mario universe is my favorite because I go way back with Mario too. Like we got a Nintendo basically as soon as they crossed the ocean, and it was just such an exciting thing. Like Mario was my first example of what a video game could be, the first Super Mario Brothers for NES. And if that's not acceptable, I gotta go with the Marvel Universe just because it now includes Star Wars and a bunch of stuff. Like, I have twice as many Marvel books as I do DC, mostly just out of convenience. All right, and then there's the favorite MCU movie, and then least favorite as well. And my favorite is constantly changing, but right now I'm gonna say Spider-Man Homecoming. And mostly, I'm sure you can YouTube search this, but watch the dynamic between Michael Keaton and Tom Holland in the rearview mirror, that whole thing, that is so amazing and memorable. Like, it's such a small scene and everything. I mean, it's a big scene as far as the plot is concerned, but it's relatively short. But just that dynamic and how tense it is and everything, just for that performance alone, Spider-Man Homecoming. I could go on a rant about all the other films that I enjoyed from MCU and why, but I'm not going to. The least favorite MCU movie, I gotta say, is Death of the Incredible Hulk from 1990, because that whole franchise should have been dead like 3-4 years before it actually died. Like, talk about beating a dead horse. That movie is terrible. And I've seen it so many times. We recorded it off of the television, and I just watched it like over and over. I don't know why it's so bad. But if that doesn't count because it's not really the MCU in this canon, I'm going to have to say Age of Ultron because that was actually the first time that I felt disappointed by an MCU film. And it's sort of like what you were saying about Edward Norton in the recasting of the Hulk. And then he wants us to shout out 3 YouTubers who we think could use a little more love. I think there was a stipulation like under a certain number of subscribers, but I'm pretty sure I got that covered here. So Alex Big Blue shows a lot of support to all the rest of the community, and his subscriber count is still lower than it should be. So let's go sub him up. I'm going to leave the links to everybody below. Next one is Nomad1966. I recently entered one of his contests. And then his wife, Flutterby989, just because her, again, subscriber count is way too low. And lastly, an honorable mention, a new coworker of mine. It turns out she's a YouTuber as well. She's only at 69 subscribers, or I think it's 70 as of my subscription. She's going through to be a dietitian, so she knows what she's talking about. If you're at all interested in like healthy recipes or exercise or anything like that, go sub her up. Not entirely sure how to pronounce the last name, but it's ANJOLI space VANDERKUUR. Got it. Yeah, so I'll leave the link to that below too. But go sub her up, show some love, watch the videos, and leave a comment if you're interested. All right, so thanks a lot to Jerno, and I hope you like the entry. All right, bye.